Netflix's Ozark earned 5 Emmy nominations in its first season, and it's poised to earn even more for its second. I'm Zach Lowe's of Gold Derby, and joining me now is Cindy Mollo. She's a 2-time Emmy nominee, and she is one of the editors on Ozark. So, Cindy, what were some of the new challenges for you and everybody else with this second season?
In the second season, everything was more developed. We weren't just, meeting a character like Marty Byrde for the first time. And we now, and particularly Jason Bateman as Marty Byrde, and we were now, living with them. The kids fully knew what was going on. Like it's a different world, but there's still this sort of struggle within the family for normalcy. And so it was just about kind of making everything feel authentic, like people we would know who happened to be money launderers and opening a casino and doing all these kind of really high crimes. It was also a good season for the female characters, so it was fun to explore those characters who maybe didn't get as much time in the first season as we were getting to know Marty and all his accomplishments, so to speak.
Right. Well, certainly, I mean, with any second season of the show, you do get to delve in a little bit more into character backstories, character relationships, and things like that. Can you talk a bit about, how you guys editorially, explored those relationships, strengthened those character traits, things like that?
Well, what was kind of interesting in the second season, possibly by design, possibly because, Jason generally directs the first 2 episodes. So then the third and the fourth episodes, he's written out of a couple of days so he can be doing his director's cuts in LA. So it was an opportunity in those third and fourth scripts, which I did in the second season, to give more time to the family and the, the character of Ruth Langmore in particular. And so the scenes are already there, kind of skewed towards those characters. And some of them we've spent time with in the first season, like Ruth. She's really prominent in the first season, but her younger brother, Wyatt, maybe not so much. And he had a storyline about wanting to go to school, and he's visited his dead father and learns that Ruth has been instrumental in his death. And so it was minor characters who, for different reasons, got bigger roles. And, maybe you're not as familiar with the performances they're capable of. And so, whereas with someone like Laura Linney or Jason Bateman, you have really good, really smart choices in every take. Sometimes with the younger actors who haven't had as many big scenes, you just have to kind of look for it and realize, oh, that's how he's playing, he or she is playing this moment. That's really interesting. And now let me build, around that. So I think it's kind of about being open to, to not assume anything and to be open to what the actors give you who maybe haven't had as much screen time.
Right. It's always interesting how performances are pretty much, you can take bits and pieces from different takes and find things like that. And so
don't tell anyone.
I won't. No, your secret's safe with me. Talk a bit about, the tone of the show. I mean, it's a very dark subject matter, very darkly shot show. Barely any sunlight in this, entire series. So, I mean, can you talk about sustaining that kind of dark tone editorially?
So it goes back to the first season for me. When I first met with Chris Mundy, the showrunner, I had read the first 2 scripts, and you make certain assumptions, or you could make certain assumptions when you hear Jason Bateman, money launderer, has to go on the lam in the Ozarks. You might think, oh, this is a dark comedy. And when I read the scripts, I thought, wow, we have to talk about the tone, because I can see where this could be played as a dark comedy or as a drama, where occasionally something is just funny because life is funny. And that's exactly what Chris said. He said, everyone is talking about how we have to nail this tone and how it's very specific. We don't want it to be a comedy. And in fact, the first time I met with Jason, when we were talking about that, he kind of said, if you think something's funny, you're wrong, which was just a way of saying, don't cut it to be funny. Like if something happens to be funny, if there's just a funny moment, you can let it happen, but don't cut it as if it's comedy. And so that was always the challenge. I mean, someone like Jason is just naturally funny, and some of these circumstances are just naturally funny in a dark world. So it's always to go for the most natural performances. All the actors are fantastic, and to the earlier comment, you rarely do have to piece a performance together. It's, these guys are all great, and it's just to look for natural performances. So these are believable characters, and they're always in some sort of calamitous situation. I mean, just when Marty Byrde thinks that he's gotten the family out of one predicament, they're in another one. They now owe even more money than they owed before, that kind of thing. So it's in the writing and it's in the performances, and it's just about not fighting that.
Well, to that end, I mean, have you ever had to lose something that you really liked just because it didn't fit with the general tone of the show? Or?
Not because it didn't fit with the tone. I mean, our challenge in the first season, especially, we had a lot of scripts that were really long. Mm-hmm. And in the second episode, there was a whole introduction for Rachel's character, who owns the Blue Cat. It was like a backstory about her relationship with her grandmother, and there just wasn't time. And so that had to go. I can't really think of another big lift, but it's never been because the tone was wrong in any of my episodes, and I haven't heard of it in any of the others. Everyone pretty much, even the day players come in and they totally get what they're a part of. So, yeah.
Well, then in terms of because I mean, the show also does a really good job of building suspense throughout each episode. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to that end, can you talk about how you sustain that feeling of intensity and suspense and things like that?
I think there are a number of factors that play into it. I mean, it's always in the writing. They're never trying to give too much away. In the performances, people don't indicate too much, and in the editing, someone gets a phone call and it's horrible news, and we don't cut to the phone. We just stay on their face. What is the news? What are they reacting to? We like to feel like we're making the audience lean in and listen carefully and anticipate what's coming. We don't want to spoon feed. We want them to be really engaged. And so we don't show and tell everything, to help facilitate that. And also our score is not, I think I can speak for Vix Patel, our other editor, and myself. We tend to bring the music in later, let the actor have the moment. And the music isn't overly narrative. It sets a tone, it plays into the suspense, but it's not telling you exactly what to feel. So it's very rare in our score that you'll hear big swells of emotional music. It's more about tone and tempo, suspense, all of that.
One of the hardest things to ever ask an editor is, can you point to a specific scene that you think shows off your work editorially? Because so often, people say, well, my work is supposed to be invisible when you're an editor. But I mean, were there moments from this second season that, you would, just in terms of Emmy submissions, for instance, I mean, what you would say?
I'm trying to think specifically. There are a number of moments that I was really proud of. In the fourth episode, there's this beautiful moment where Wyatt Langmore is kind of at home, sad and lonely, playing guitar, and his dead father appears to him, and they're playing this Bowie song. And Andrew Bernstein, the director, just gave all the right options. And in a weird sort of way, sometimes my most favorite moments are those that come together easily, because I can tell what the director was planning. The actor gave, just the right performance, and it's almost like something speaks to you in the footage, and you're not wrestling it to make something of it. It comes together. And that was a sequence. And sometimes when you see you have a musical number where people are singing and playing live, especially on a show that's not meant for musical performances, there's a little bit of dread, and that one just came together beautifully, as did the opening of, I think it was that episode where Agent Petty is in his hotel room kind of biding time, waiting to get Marty Byrde, and he's watching episodes of Dragnet. And once we decided to start with the opening theme song, it just kind of lent itself to a certain approach. The arrest at the end of that episode came together well. But the episode I'm most proud of, One Way Out, which Alex Sakharov directed, I opened that script and realized, oh my God, there are amazing long scenes between Wendy and the guy who's kidnapped her, Mason, the preacher. And Marty has to get to them. So there's a ticking clock. There are like really beautiful emotional moments between Wendy and Mason. The Byrdes find themselves in a position to make a choice that they swore they would never make. It was the thing that separated them from common criminals. And then it turns out to be their only way out. And so that episode was, and I realize I'm making it sound like, I had nothing to do with it. But I think as you get more experienced, you learn when to step back and not get in the way of the material. So in that episode, it was really about, not cutting too much when we didn't need to. The performances were great. Maybe we had to tighten things up for running time, and we had some choices, but it was just all about serving this really great script, understanding like when to have a heavy hand and when to lay back. And it has a beautiful montage at the end when Wendy and Marty Wendy's kind of taking care of Marty, but then together they're disposing of Mason's body, and we realize they're doing this interview that started at the top of the episode, and you just realize that they've switched parts. Like Wendy is there as the caretaker, almost like the boss, and Marty is really rattled by what's happened. And there were beautiful choices to make, and again, it comes together well when you understand the performances that you should be going for and the story that you need to tell, and you just kind of stay out of the way.
You're a two-time Emmy nominee for your work on Mad Men and Dash and Lily. You've also gotten American Cinema Editor nominations for Ozark and Homicide: Life on the Street.
Yeah.
So you've been a busy person for all your career. What has that recognition meant for you?
It validates one thing, which is that, I started on Homicide in New York, and I loved working on that show for 5+ seasons. And that was a show that was different from your typical network show. In the camera work, in the editing. And I always knew when I was on that show that it was a really special experience. And I said to myself when I moved to LA, I've already been on this great show. I have to, from now going forward, always choose the best material I can possibly work on. And, Dash and Lily was Kathy Bates and Judy Davis and Sam Shepard, and a really, really solid script. And Mad Men, obviously, I was on it the second season, and I was a fan of the show in the first season. Chris Mundy was someone I'd wanted to work with for a long time as a writer. I was lucky to be on House of Cards. I've just always tried to choose projects that I wouldn't just be proud to have on my resume, but that I thought where I would also be learning from the best people possible. Because as an editor, it's like you're in this little film school. Every time you go on to a new show and you learn the dynamics of those creative people, and you work with those performances, you're learning, you're expanding your repertoire. And so it's a gift to be able to work over the years with so many talented people. It really is like the best, longest film program ever, and I've been really lucky.
Certainly, I mean, a show like Homicide, you mentioned how it wasn't typical of network television at the time. You really do see the seeds of what became this kind of golden age of television, and with shows on HBO and now Netflix, and
right,
the way that the narratives are more daring, and
yep.
So yeah.
Well, and for years, so many of the people I worked with in the business were a director I worked with on Homicide, or a writer producer from Homicide. So I used to joke that everything in my career came from Homicide. And it was also a show that I was really lucky because we didn't have a lot of rules. We could cross the line, we could repeat lines if it was not jokey, if it was really important to the moment, and if it was organic to the moment. So I didn't start out in episodic television with this feeling of like, well, you can never do this and you have to do that. I worked with a lot of people who were new filmmakers and who tried to do really different things, and it benefited me in so many ways. I've always been really grateful that was how I got my start.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on another great season of Ozark.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your interest.
Of course, you're welcome.
Okay.
And thanks to all of you at home for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like buttons below, and make sure you visit us at goldderby.com to make your predictions and for all the latest award show news.